This video introduces you to the EMG and breathing application's audio feedback capabilities. Using audio feedback allows you to train without looking at the screen, so you can use the application during eyes-closed meditation or mindfulness practice, for example. There are three kinds of audio feedback: MIDI, breathing tone, and threshold. You can use them in combination at the same time if you wish. The controls for audio feedback are found at the bottom of the application's main window. Each of the three has an on-off button and a volume slider, and you can choose which parameter to base the feedback on, for example breathing rate or minimum EMG. Threshold-based feedback involves configuring the thresholds using these controls. Let's start with threshold-based feedback. Firstly, you activate it with this button and control its volume with this slider. The idea of this feedback is that whenever the feedback parameter crosses a threshold, a sound is triggered, for example a bell sound. The value of using the threshold is that the feedback is generally less intrusive, freeing you to focus on your direct experience. The feedback only comes in when you've drifted away from your desired mind-body state. For example, you can set it so that a bell rings whenever your breath goes too fast. In the EMG and breathing application, there are two separate threshold controls, one for muscle tension and the other for breathing. So the feedback can tell you either when your muscle tension drifts out of your desired range, or when your breathing does, or both. Let's look at the breathing threshold controls. This control selects the parameter to base the feedback on, either breathing rate or inhalation to exhalation ratio. If you select breathing rate, for example, you can set the feedback to warn you when the breath goes either too fast or too slow. You see that the bar graph changes color depending on what parameter you select. The range of the graph is set to be the same as the long-term chart. This bar controls the actual level of the threshold. You can drag it with your mouse to change it. You can set the feedback to sound either when the signal goes above the limit, or below it, or even both or neither using this control. If you select outside, you'll see two bars displayed, and you'll get feedback when the signal goes either above the upper bar or below the lower bar. These numeric displays tell you the exact settings of the levels. Selecting off means you can have threshold feedback only for muscle tension and not for breathing. The EMG threshold works in a very similar way. Next we'll cover MIDI feedback. Press this button to turn it on. It plays a piano note repeatedly whose pitch varies with your chosen feedback parameter. Use this control to select which parameter to use. For example, if I select EMG, the note plays 4 times per second, and the greater the muscle tension, the higher the pitch. If I select breathing rate, then the MIDI note plays once per breath. The faster the breathing, the higher the pitch. In fact, for all the other parameters, the note plays once per breath, except for chest score, which plays twice per breath. The pitch range corresponds to the range used for your chosen parameter in one of the displays. For example, if you're using breathing rate, it uses the setting from the long-term display. Note that changing the parameter while you're running a session causes the application to have to restart, so it's best to make your choice before you press play. There's an option that lets you use the breathing threshold to set up a kind of target. The closer you are to the target, the lower the pitch. Let's move on to breathing tone feedback. This button activates a tone which follows the breath like this. You can see how this feedback is designed to support breath awareness or mindfulness of breathing practice. The pitch varies with the feedback parameter. Again, you can select which parameter using this control. So for example, if I select breathing rate, then the tone goes deeper as the breathing gets slower. As with MIDI feedback, changing the parameter during a session causes the application to have to restart. The scaling of the pitch is the same as that used in one of the displays. For example, if you select minimum EMG, the range is the same as that used in the short-term display. Or if you select breathing rate, the range is the same as that used in the long-term display. Again, like MIDI feedback, there's an option that lets you use the breathing threshold as a kind of target, so that the closer you are to the target, the lower the pitch.